Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 157, The Rise of Ripley. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie Alien as we wrap up First Contact Month. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing very well today. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in writing world, not much. Still dealing with life stuff this week.
Yeah.
So kind of just more thoughts bouncing around in the head than actually writing. So unfortunately, nothing too exciting to report. How about you?
Nothing too exciting to report either, though it's funny. As part of my author Patreon, I have started sharing posts, which I call From the Far Horizons, which talk about some of the other things that I've got that I want to work on, in the future. And sometimes when I think about all the other things that I want to work on, it is overwhelming. And I'm wondering, how am I
Yeah.
going to do this? So, for example, I have a short story that was printed in an anthology, published in an anthology. It was a very cool experience because the anthology included some amazing names in science fiction. And was such an honor to have my story in there with them. And I love this story and I love this character and I really want to write her backstory. And so the question is, do I do that before or after, all these other stories that I have? And it's kind of hard to decide. And I'm not even at a place where I can decide because I've got, so much on my plate. I got to finish the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard first before I can even decide what to work on next.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Or you could do like Brandon Sanderson and just put that on hold, do something else, and then come back to it.
And there is something to be said for that because it sort of recharges your creative well by working in another world. I totally understand why he does that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But then the question is which world am I going to work in? I've got a fantasy story that I've started. I've actually got a first chapter of a fantasy series. And I love this first chapter. I think it's really good. And, for whatever my opinion is worth. And I've already started a first chapter for the backstory of this character for that short story. So, I've got all these little things started. And I just, really need to just figure out a way to continue to work through this stuff on a regular basis, whether I'm in the same world or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever write one thing, like you're in the middle of it, and then you write something else, and then you come back? You ever go back and forth?
Sometimes, yes. Yes, because sometimes something pops into my head. I'm like, oh, that would be really cool for this. And then so I open that up. I mean, I use Atticus for formatting and I use Atticus for drafting.
Yeah.
And I know some people, Atticus is a software that enables authors to format their books. I mean, that's really its primary function is formatting. And so, but it also provides a platform for writing too. I used to use Scrivener and I find Atticus easier to work with for me. I know people have opinions about, various things and got to use the tool that works best for you. So, no problems there. For me, Atticus works. Now, do I save my Atticus document every single time I go in and put in a new chapter? Absolutely. I don't assume that Atticus is going to hang on to it. It is, it's in the cloud and I've never had a problem. I've been using it for years. Never had a problem, but I always save everything. If I make a change, I upload a doc. It allows me to save as a docx. I upload a docx so that I have it there. Yeah. So yes, the question is, I have so many open new books in Atticus. I've got Atticus open right now because I always have it open and I'm looking at it. Let me see how many actual books I've got in here. 52.
52? Holy smokes.
Yeah, 52 books. Now, some of them are like placeholders.
Yeah.
Like I want to write a follow-up to my time travel series about my time travel series is the story of a woman who discovers her grandmother is a time traveler. I want to write a series related to her grandmother's time travels.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
I've got five books in my head for that. So I have placeholders for that. Do I have
Yeah.
any actual writing in that? No, I just have placeholder.
Okay. I
So
see what
that's
you're
why
saying.
there's like so many.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I mean it's just stuff like that. I have an idea. I throw a placeholder in there to help me remember what I'm doing. And of course I write a lot of short stories. So those short stories have their own book placeholders as well. So that's part of why there's so much there.
Okay.
Yeah. And what is there anything in them? A lot of them have nothing in them.
Yeah. I think that's normal then. I have a lot of
Yeah,
book
exactly.
ideas for stories that are like, okay, this would be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know enough of like what's the actual story there. I have an idea, but I haven't fleshed it out at all. So it's probably something.
Yeah.
I don't have that many stories
Exactly.
probably, but over 20, I'm sure.
Yeah. And one of these days Atticus says they're actually going to create a filing system so that I can actually put books from particular series into a filing system, which will also be very nice because then
Yeah, they
these
need that.
52 titles will all be organized and, under the series
Yeah,
that they belong
that's
to, and it'll
something.
be a lot easier to go through.
Yeah, they desperately need that.
Yeah. Otherwise, what I'm doing is I'm just throwing in placeholder imagery.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Okay, I've babbled a lot about my books. Let's talk about what we've consumed. Have you encountered anything interesting in books, movies, or television?
See, been watching the latest season of Rick and Morty. You ever see that show?
No.
It's an animated show. The idea, I guess, spawned from Back to the Future. Rick and Morty was
Oh,
originally
okay.
Doc and Marty, so they changed it to Rick and Morty, the creators. Anyway, it's it's a really entertaining show, I think. It's very, it's about this grandpa guy and his grandson going on these adventures. He's got, like, this portal where he can portal
Oh,
around the
how
different
fun.
Earth universe, and it's very sci-fi focused, and it's very sort of kind of nihilistic and crude and, has that sort of against it, but it's just so entertaining and has such great sci-fi ideas that I very much enjoy it.
Good.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been watching that.
Okay. I watched the finale of Good Omens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
How'd you
that was
like it?
fun. I liked it. I liked it. I like that show. I think that there's a lot of great chemistry between the characters whose names I can't remember right off the top. Aziraphale and
Yeah.
Crowley. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's there's great chemistry between them,
Yeah.
and the tone is the tone and the message is really nice. I like it. So it was enjoyable to finish watching that. Tried to watch the season 5 of Ghosts. I stopped in the middle when they broke off for the Olympics and I hadn't gotten back to it again. And I found myself actually a little impatient with it because the stories are starting to feel a little repetitive.
Yeah. I can see that.
So, yeah. So I actually stopped watching in the middle of one. It just feels like it's the same thing. And and it's really important to say that, the characters are fantastic, the actors are fantastic. I like actually the B plots better than the A plots. I might try to watch a couple of more, but I know I was a little frustrated. I was like, yeah, I feel like I've seen this one before. It seems like the story's the same.
I do feel like they need to have more real progression with the characters. It seems like, oh, we learned this lesson, but then they're kind of like back to who they were almost
Yeah, yeah.
a bit.
I guess for
And, you know,
yeah, I guess for me it's sort of like, oh no, we're at risk of losing the inn again.
yeah, that's true too. Yeah, exactly.
Uh, yeah.
I think that general idea kind of is true. Like I want to feel like there's progression to the story and to the
Yeah.
characters,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
we're moving on to something new. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that. I still enjoyed the season, but I would agree with you what you said.
Yeah. And I started reading I still need to look for Contact, it's around here someplace, I haven't had a chance to look for it, but I started reading Watership Down, which I remember actually my mom reading that to us when we were kids, and so I don't think I've looked at it since then, and I'm really enjoying it, reading it again. It's a good story, it's well written.
Yeah, I have never read it, so maybe we'll have to discuss that one.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Would you like to talk about Alien?
Yeah. In the meantime, something a little bit darker. Let's go into Alien.
Oh, Watership Down's got darkness, no doubt.
Yeah, that's true from what I've heard.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie Alien, and I will read the very short synopsis that comes up on Google. In deep space, the crew of the commercial starship Nostromo is awakened from their cryosleep capsules halfway through their journey home to investigate a distress call from an alien vessel. The terror begins when the crew encounters a nest of eggs inside the alien ship. An organism from inside an egg leaps out and attaches itself to one of the crew, causing him to fall into a coma. Boy, that doesn't do it justice at all, does it?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I love this movie. It's obviously it's a sci-fi movie, and it's a first contact movie, which is why we're discussing it this month in our series of first contact stories. But the primary genre is obviously horror. And man, I think this thing holds up so well. It really is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Certainly in the science fiction horror genre, I think it's it's near the top. Let's put it that way. And I think it still
What would
works.
you put at the top?
I don't know that I would put any specific one at the top, but it would be up there with other movies like John Carpenter's The Thing, for example, which is also an older movie. Yeah, in sci-fi horror genre, I think it's really really good. I can't believe it held up as well as it did on a rewatch for me. I think part of it is not necessarily story related, but just the whole atmosphere of the movie, the visuals, the style, the sound, like, it all still works really well. I was shocked at how well it looked visually. This movie was made in the 1970s, and it still looks really good. Story-wise, looking at it from sort of like a horror story, I think I'll discuss this more as horror than First Contact, even though it obviously is First Contact. It's the horror version of First Contact, right?
Yeah.
Versus some of the other stories that we've discussed. It's certainly nothing like Contact, for example. So it starts off, puts you right in that mode, right? With people who are completely out of their element, right? They're woken early out of their cryo sleep chambers. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what happened. They immediately look into it and hear this creepy audio signal, which they don't know what it is. And they're just setting that tone right off the start. Very cool, very clever. And like a lot of horror stories, you get this sort of slow unveiling of what the monster is, right, over the course of the story. And here, right, we get this signal, which okay, that's creepy, but it's obviously not the alien. It's from another alien, even, right? Another ship that's on this planet and is mostly deserted. We just see one of those other aliens that was, killed by the alien of this story. There's a lot of layers going on here, and we
Yeah.
see the effects of the monster alien before we even know it exists, right? We see the other alien, and his chest is like cracked open from the inside, and like we don't know what's going on, but obviously it's very foreboding. And then like the horror movies do, you see more of this thing, right? In terms of, oh, stage one is this egg, and then stage two is this face hugger tentacle thing that latches onto the person's face, and then this other creature that busts out of him, and right, so it's like you get the reveal in different stages of the organism, which is new. A lot of times it's just a reveal of a single monster type, and here it's like stages of its life cycle, which is really interesting. I love that. I think there's a good horror setup in terms of people being trapped, which is a very common horror thing, right? You're stuck with this on this ship, and this thing is out there and it's after you, taking you out one by one. And there's some great horrific moments, right? Not necessarily scares, although it does have some of that. Like the thing melting through his face shield and wrapping itself around his face is just horrific. I can't put myself back into 1979 to what that experience must have been like. There's nothing like this had been created at that point, and it was certainly not to this level of quality, right? It just looked so real and it was terrifying. And then the interesting thing is that a lot of the other deaths were relatively subdued and sort of almost off screen. It's like you know that they got taken by this thing, but you don't see it happen, which I thought was very interesting. A lot of times movies will become, how can we introduce the new gory killing? And this doesn't fully do that, which is really cool. Except for the android, that becomes sort of a gore fest, but it's a robot, so I guess that's more acceptable. And there's some good turns in this story, right? Like the guy seeming to be all right after the alien, releases off of his face, and then obviously he's not. And the alien gets loose on their ship, and then we learn that the company has its own mission and is relayed through the android who's actually working against them. I think that's another really good thing in this story that works and adds to the tension is you have Ash the android who's working against them. It's like one of their own is now, not only is the monster its own problem, now you have one of them like working sort of with the monster in a sense. Yes, adds to the terror of the situation. Let's see, character-wise, I mean, Ripley is one of these classic characters that everybody seems to love, and I do too. I think for me, a lot of it is when the movie starts and it gets going, we don't really know who the protagonist is, or even if there's like a single protagonist, because there's just this group and you see them doing different things. Or actually, the first character we're actually introduced to isn't her. It's, if I remember right, it's the guy who actually dies first, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
first one up, first one
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, the guy who wakes up. You're like, oh, okay, this is the guy we're going to be following, and it's like, nope, he's out. So it's not revealed until like later on. It's like, okay, who's going to be the survivor here, which is a cool thing. And I think part of the reason she survives, like you see early on that she's smart, right? It's not dumb luck or solely perseverance. Like from very early on, you're like, okay, this person kind of we can see that she knows what she's doing, and I think you can root for her, right? She's like, no, we can't bring this guy back on the ship with an alien on his face. What are you doing? You're going to put us all at risk. And of course, that is exactly what happened. And, if you're in that situation, you could see, oh, yeah, her making that decision makes complete sense. But at the same time, on the other side of it, they're not necessarily making a dumb decision. It's like they're trying to save this guy's life. Right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I like about this movie too, is unlike a lot of horror movies where the characters just make really stupid decisions, people here seemed very real and very reasonable, and you can relate to the decisions that they make, even if you don't necessarily agree with them. They're understandable. And from a given person's viewpoint, you can see why they do the things they do. And I really appreciate that. And I think it's one of the things that makes this movie stand out above the rest, because you have people who are potentially trying to do the right thing, actually, and they're still getting taken out by one by one, which makes it, I think, which adds to the horror, versus people who are doing obviously dumb things and getting taken out. So for me, I think that's one of the things that elevates this above the standard horror movie. And then there's all the sci-fi stuff, which it's like the cool ships and being in space and being with aliens and all that stuff is cool. The visual design is really cool. The H.R. Giger designed, I think I said his name right, I'm not sure, the alien and all the ships. It has his distinct style, which makes it feel alien, right? The feel of this movie is alien from the moment they land on that planet and start looking at their ship. So I thought that
Yeah.
was really cool. Let's see. And I like how I like the characters. I like how the person who survived seemed to be the sharpest and most level-headed of the group. So that's where I'll leave it.
Okay. I like this movie, but I don't like the horror part of it because, as you know, I'm not a horror fan. So I'm actually not paying attention during the pure horror parts. I'm, like, looking away. I'm not engaged because that's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And I was, like, really watching myself. "Okay, what are you gonna do when he gets the horror stuff?" And I'm like, "I am going to play solitaire." So and I was curious because one of the things I wanted to ask you was, I understand, the hero's journey for, most stories, but there's no hero's journey here in this per
No.
se. I mean, I guess in a way you could say that, the hero's journey is Ripley surviving. Maybe? But she doesn't really do anything. There's no real personal growth from point A to point Z
Right.
that results in her survival. So, what are the elements of a horror movie? What makes a horror movie?
I think it's very common for horror stories to not have that typical character growth. They're more like disaster movies in a sense where you're just trying to
Okay.
survive this horrible situation,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
and it's often comes down to either outwitting or persevering or figuring out the nature of your enemy, what I call just generically the monster, and how to defeat that thing. It's kind of like mystery stories in a way, right? A lot of mysteries, it's not about the character growth, it's about figuring out the solution to this problem.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that is in horror movies. And then another part of the reason a lot of horror movies don't have character growth is and a sort of hero's journey is because everyone just dies sometimes in the horror movie.
Yeah,
There is no one who survives.
yeah. Well, I will say this, I loved one of the things I loved most about this story was the depth of world building that was conveyed in such a short period of time. I mean, that was a masterclass in establishing really deep world building with just a few well-placed shots to give us a sense and feeling of the ship and good dialogue to give us a sense and feeling of these characters and what they're doing and what it's all about. I mean, you really feel immersed very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that is really well done. I was curious about one of the things I noticed, like right at the beginning, when you see the ship receive the distress call and you're focusing on the helmet, I wrote down the note Chekhov's helmet question mark, which it kind of sort of is.
Yeah.
Because even though we don't use that helmet, she needs a helmet to finally destroy the alien.
Right.
So I'm gonna call that Chekhov's helmet at
Well,
the
and you
very
also think, okay, this is a safety feature, and then the alien just melts right through it.
right. Yeah, there's that too. Yep. I also really liked, for example, at the very beginning, we do these long shots of the interior of the ship, and we're establishing it's quiet, everybody's asleep, the ship's sort of functioning on its own. It's very unfinished, very industrial
Yeah.
looking, and it looks very sort of it's interesting, but not in any way threatening. But then as soon as the chest burster happens, then we get almost identical shots, or maybe not identical shots, but very similar shots of now we're looking at the ship through an entirely different lens as all of this industrial space is a place for this thing to hide. And I thought
Yeah.
that was brilliant, it's mirroring what you saw at the beginning, and now the tone is completely different. Exact same set, but now it's very different. Loved it. I thought, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Very fascinating use of light and shadow that, again, this is a visual medium. So what does that look like in writing? Well, it looks like communicating that atmospheric feeling
Yeah.
of light and shadow. So this is a very atmospheric. This is like, like Arrival, we've got something that's very atmospheric in tone. Now Arrival's atmosphere is very different, but the atmosphere, it relies heavily on the atmosphere, not only for the horror part, but also just to build the tension and to communicate the world building. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I hop in for a sec right here?
yeah, yeah,
This is another thing I forgot to mention, which I completely agree with what you just said. I feel like it's hard to discuss a movie like this with just talking about the story because audio visuals are so important.
yeah,
Like, in the first act where they're just walking around the alien ship, there's a fair amount of time where they're just going through rooms and it's like nothing is really happening, but because the visuals are interesting and the sound and the atmosphere, it's still engaging. It's a very rare movie in that way for me, to where, like, not
yeah,
much is happening and you're just like, "Yeah, what's going on?" You're exploring this new place with them, and it's just
yeah,
so well done. Okay, I'm done.
yeah. No, that's good. That's fine. The other thing that I actually really appreciated was when they got the realization they were pulled out of their sleep early because they had to go investigate this signal. It would have been so easy to say, "Nope, we're not gonna do it, it's too scary, whatever," but
Yeah,
they had this contract clause for these people who were definitely needing this for their to support their earning money to live, and so that was such a great not over the top, not hit you in the face, but here's the why. This is why would they have to take the step forward, and I really appreciated that because it was organic, it was logical, and it wasn't like, "We have to." It was, being ordered to. It was just, "The contract says you have to. If you don't wanna go, you lose out on the money in the contract."
yeah,
Period. And it makes it their choice to go forward, which I think is really important for a story like this. The other thing that I noticed was at the end, when Ripley starts to, like when she's now in charge and after the attack by Ash, and she's giving the orders, the structure of the movie is very similar to Aliens, at
yes,
the end of Aliens.
yeah,
I mean, it was almost in a lot of ways some duplicate behavior, which I am totally fine with because it works. It's the part of the movie I like best. She's taking action. She is, she's you use the word all the time. She's agentive.
yeah,
Up to this point, she's had to react and react and react and react. And when she does take action, like refusing to open quarantine, she's overridden, like, by Ash, who, of course, now we know later in the story is doing it because he's got different orders.
yeah,
But, yeah, so anyway, it was just really interesting, even down to, like, some of the same feeling, the same sound of the female voice counting down the destruction of the Nostromo versus the destruction of the nuclear power plant, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
it felt the same. The other thing I really enjoyed was when they were in the infirmary and they're working on Kane, some of the sound effects of, like, just the equipment in the background were the same ones used in Blade Runner, which so I
Mm,
recognized those. I'm like, "Oh,
interesting.
that's a Blade Runner sound."
That's cool, yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I enjoy I, again, am not a big horror fan, but I do like Alien, and the reason I like Alien is because I saw Aliens first. That's my context
Yeah,
for this story, and so I don't mind going back and watching this story. Had I seen this first, I probably would not have liked it so much because I'm not a big horror fan. So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Speaking
So
of
let's
the
talk about go ahead.
speaking of the infirmary scene where they're working on him, I love when what was his name? Parker, I think, who was saying, "Well, why don't they freeze that guy? Like, why aren't they freezing him?"
Yeah.
He keeps asking it over and over, and I'm like, "Yeah, listen to
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Freeze that guy. Put him on ice
There
till you
were a
get
lot
back."
of there are a lot of people that should be listened to. Should have
Yes,
listened to Lambert.
right. Yeah,
So let's talk about what we might have changed as a writer.
yeah. Well, I don't have a lot for this movie. I think it's, like I said, it's one of my favorites. Something I noticed, I mean, no, my changes are small and pretty much insignificant, really, in terms of the impact of the story. But one thing that pulled me out was you had this thing burst out of the guy's chest and then go running off, right? And
Yeah.
the next time we see it, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's like, how did that get so big? Like, there's a law of physics here, right? Like, it has to consume energy to grow like this. So I would have either had a scene of it eating or shown that it had eaten something.
Yeah, like a drop in the ship's systems reserves.
Yeah, and you're like, because that could help build the tension too of like, what's it
Yeah,
doing? It's like, man, it couldn't have eaten all of that. There's no way. Right, this little thing, and then next time you see it, it's huge. You're like, oh, it did. So
yeah,
that
I
was a
agree.
small thing that could have been added in that would have made that transition a little bit better. And then another thing that kind of got me, where it seemed a bit silly when they went into the area, the infirmary, I guess, the room that they set up where the facehugger was on his face, was on Kane's face. And then after it was off his face, they just walk in there with like flashlights
Yeah,
looking for the thing.
yeah,
Like, wait, you don't have any kind of weapon, a flamethrower, protection, something? Like that was the one scene that seemed like, okay, this is just dumb. There should be some kind of analysis here as to what they should be doing, not just walking around looking for it.
I agree.
So those are the two things that kind of pulled me out in the moment.
I have to say I got pulled out a lot more,
Okay.
and I think one of the things that you said about how those folks' behaviors seemed logical, and I agree. I think they seemed logical, but I would have liked to have seen even more a little bit more tightness to it. For example, like when they lose comms, they're walking away from the ship and they can't hear them anymore. To me, there should have been protocols in place for you don't keep going if you lose comms.
Yeah.
So if you're going to keep going, give us a reason why. Besides this, we have to go sort this out because the captain was very focused on keeping his ship safe and his people safe. And so to push forward through that for this didn't make sense to me. So I think it could have been something simple like, Captain, we've lost comms, protocol says we should head back until whatever. And captain says, you know, I think we're okay for now. Let's just keep going. Something like that.
Yeah, just a small note.
Just a small note to, again, further the choice issue, because I think that whole you can go out there and get your contract pay, or you can not go out there and not get paid by the contract. And that whole choice of everybody choosing to do this is really important to this story. I think would have been really cool. Everyone made a choice that led to this
That's a
terrible
good idea.
outcome.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I had the same question about you. With the face hugger on his face, why wasn't Kane in quarantine? He was supposed to stay in quarantine outside the ship, so why not set a quarantine up inside the ship? And they kind of did that. They were wearing, suits and stuff, but there should have been a full quarantine, whatever. And I think again, this is another opportunity for choice. Ripley could have said, "Okay, you came in, but why aren't we quarantining the infirmary?"
Right.
And just something along those lines to allow another choice to be made. I think would have been helpful. It didn't make sense that their shuttle wasn't big enough to accommodate the whole crew. Why not?
Yeah, because of the story, that's why.
Right, okay, but
That's what
there's
the
I
writer
think
said.
yeah, I think that I think what they could have said was, we're 10 months outside of Earth. We can accommodate everybody, but we'll run out of resources or
Mm,
something. And maybe that's what
yeah.
they meant, but it didn't sound like it. It says like, "Oh, it can only accommodate 3." Why? So I think if they said, "We've got enough pods there, we just don't have enough resources for 10 months," then we kind of see what the tension
Oh,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great,
Yeah,
yeah. I like that.
yeah. And then I would have liked you kind of pointed out that I think a little bit more world building in terms of the alien itself would have been very helpful. And they did that in Aliens. They gave the creatures a much more clearly understood biology. And you're right, there was the beginning of that here. We have the egg, we have the face hugger, we have the chest burster, and then we have the giant thing. But what was the giant thing doing
Yeah,
besides just grabbing people?
right.
And I would have loved to some sense of what that looked like. If, for example, we got to see that it was preparing a space like where the eggs were on the ship, like Kane reported there was a mist and a light that, when he disturbed the light, broke the light, it disturbed the mist. They could have found a section of the Nostromo that was being constructed that way, would have added to the creepiness to no end because it was clearly going to make space for new eggs.
Yeah,
And then you and go ahead.
in the director's cut version, which is the one I watched this time, Ripley comes upon the captain and Brett, I think, They're like plastered up against the wall, covered in like all this goo and stuff,
Yeah.
like they're being prepared for food, for eggs or something like that. It's never
Yeah.
explained, but they kind of hint at something like that. So the idea for that was there, I guess, and he put it back in the director's cut.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't in the theatrical release.
Yeah, it wasn't in the one that I saw.
Okay.
So, I think it would just been really helpful as to have a better understanding as to why it was grabbing everybody
Yeah,
and
yeah.
killing them. So, yeah. Again, part of the horror is maybe not understanding why. Maybe that's part of the visceralness of the horror. It seems so random and without reason, and maybe that's just part of the genre?
There's definitely some of that. Yeah, some things are often just completely unexplained and unsatisfying as a result. That's a common thing in horror movies, unfortunately. But yeah, it does add to the sort of unnerving feel sometimes where it's like you don't
Yeah.
really know what's going on.
So, in a horror film, is there any kind of theme? I did actually pull themes from this, but is that
I think there can
are there
be.
when you yeah, okay, let's
If we
hear
look
I would love to hear what you pulled.
if we look at this specific movie, I think, it's like a lot of horror movies, it's pretty much a survival story, and it gives us what came to be known as the final girl, where it's like the one who survives is the woman or the
Oh, yeah,
girl in the story. It's like a very common horror movie trope around this time period going into the 80s and even in the 90s, maybe even now. So, yeah, I think part of it is just about the strength of the human will, if there are survivors. And in this case, I think it's more than just that because of Ripley's character. I think it's more about how keeping calm and level-headed under duress can give you the best chance for a good outcome in a situation like this, in a sort of
okay,
dire situation. So that'd be the main theme I'd probably get out of it. And there's also like some stuff going on in the background with, you know, corporations and human greed overriding human decency, that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's actually the one I pulled. I had my first one was "Don't break quarantine,"
Excellent.
and my second was not prioritizing lives is a failing strategy.
Yeah. I like
Yeah,
your first one actually, now that I think about it. That's sort of because horror movies often lead to death and tragedy, right? Maybe looking at the opposite of what they do as the theme. So, yeah, you're kind of right. It's like, had they just quarantined this person off the ship, no one else would have been killed, probably, and they could
yeah.
have just left. So, maybe that is some of the theme there.
So, as a writer, what do you take away from Alien?
Yeah, I got a couple things I take away from this. One was something that I think I discussed recently in another story is a sense of wonder, right? And in this case, also a sense of exploration can carry you through. It doesn't have to always be about plot or character, of things happening really fast. Like the opening act of this story isn't like super fast paced, but it engages you because of this sense of wonder and the sense of explanation and the sense of mystery. So like that's
Yeah,
really important. And then specifically a horror movie perspective, every death doesn't have to be gruesome in detail, as this movie shows. And sometimes it's just as effective being implied or left to the imagination. So those are my takeaways.
I like that. And for me, I like Arrival, I was so impressed with the depth of the world building and the creation of the atmosphere in a very short period of time. I thought that was masterful, and that's something that I think is really helpful and something I aspire to for writing as well.
Thank you for joining us today as we talked about the movie Alien. Huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all of our listeners. If you'd like to learn about our stories, check out E.W. Barnes's Temporal Protection Core series, where duty to history collides with personal risks. And next up is The Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, with interstellar missions, fractured allegiances, and galaxy wide conflict. Links are in the show notes.
The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, subscribers can drop a note on our YouTube channel. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the novel Dune, and we begin a 4-week Dune month.
Excellent.
Thanks so much, Mike. This is a lot of fun. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.